Welcome, Dr. Khalid Susi from Muhammad Al Khamis University, Abu Dhabi. Welcome, and you can make unmute and please for the mic, open the mic. Yes, yeah,
Yeah, it's unmuted.
yeah. Feel free to start, Doctor. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Good morning, dear teaching army. Okay, good morning, dear colleagues. Let me first introduce myself, Dr. Khalid Susi, full-time teacher and the coordinator of the English language programs at Mohammed V University, Abu Dhabi. I former Fulbright teacher. I worked in various higher education institutions, holding different administrative positions. Interested in continuous professional development of teachers. I've published considerable number of studies. I would like to seize the opportunity today to thank the Ministry of Education in UAE for inviting us to contribute our modest part into this forum on the importance of reading and how reading can be better and better for the Emirati society. As you know, there is no discussion about the importance of reading. I am not going to spend, much time on that. Scholars and researchers, if you read from time to time, in the literature, they say that when humans first thought about teaching others, it was oral, but then they realized that it should be something written. Okay, so reading is as old as the hieroglyphs. All right. In modern times, research shows that logic and reading. Let me simplify reading into defining it as the process of creating meaning. So this is what it boils down to, creating meaning. Of course, meaning for a young person is not the meaning for an adult. It's not. It depends on context. It depends on the subject. It depends on the materials you are dealing with. Modern research, as I said, has shown and has confirmed empirically that across the curricular, the impact of reading abilities and capacities of learners is unquestionable. Studies have shown that even with purely scientific and technical subjects, the ability to reading comprehension, strategies, skills, abilities, call them whatever, are at the center of academic success. Now, this might sound like a traditional, workshop, or, on the importance of reading skills and strategies and so on. This is not my goal today. It's not my goal today. Today, I would like to take us on a little, I would not say critical, look or stance or standpoint at our practices as teachers. I'm gonna focus on teachers, but it's gonna be more or less why teachers, because I think that we impact young learners, young readers a lot. My presentation today is gonna revolve around my personal conclusions and observations and changes and lessons. There is an axis, entitled with the title, under the title, personal lessons from teaching reading. Of course, my personal viewpoint, experience, and I would say mature vision of reading is at the same time influenced by the research, articles and the literature I read from time to time. Let us have a look at our goals today. Okay, so I need to move to the slide 2. I would like us today, as teachers, to go deeper and to nurture, a richer understanding of what variables interact to create the successful reading process. As you see, I did not use the indefinite article, a successful reading process, because out of my, like 20 years, of teaching second and foreign languages, I believe that there is the successful reading process. Okay, the successful process can only be one, and this is what we're gonna delve into in a moment. I would also, as a result of this, I would like us to sharpen our insights. This is part of our continuous professional development. Newer ideas lead to newer practices. When you put those newer ideas and practices, into action, right? That's what progress means. Then I also hope that we, that I shed, special, light on the teaching process, operation and focus. And at the end of this workshop, though it's going to be like 80%, 90% theoretical, I would suggest, okay, successful practices and a new approach to reading, especially with young people. Why young learners? Because, sorry, young learners, research has shown that reading at those early ages, those early years of our existence, and I think that nobody would deny this, molds and shapes our thinking, and this impacts the human being throughout his or her own life. It's reading. When you give a story to a young boy, okay, little boy or girl, that story is an experience in itself. It's not only, I'm not talking about language. This is my first point, and this is very important to me. It's not only about language. It's not only about teaching English through a story as, a second language or a foreign language, okay, but it's a means to unlock that imagination, to nurture, to improve those human faculties that that the adult, that child as an adult would later need in his or her life. So research, what is learning? What is learning? What is our part, our role as educators? In fact, it's to make things stay in the long-term memory of the learner. If you impact a learner through language, through reading, through text, and you succeed in making a change or imprint something on their personality, okay, that's what learning and that's what successful education means. So reading is a door to understanding, to creating meaning, to connecting the dots, to making logic, to and the importance of this. The importance of this. Now, I guess that this has given us an idea about our the goals of this workshop. For the next slides, okay, these are the themes, these are the points we're gonna more or less revolve around. I'm gonna talk a little bit about things I noticed, okay, teaching reading. Then I'm gonna discuss some of the not conclusions, because I believe that learning is ongoing. Professional development is a lifelong process, okay, but things that I learned from teaching reading. And then there are researchers that have really contributed to my vision, and I did some research and I found that people in fact have been sharing more or less the same ideas. Reading is a process that takes place among three main variables. It's not only language, it's the psychological aspect, it's the pedagogical aspect, and it's the motivation or the interest or the fascination. Okay, we're going to talk about these things of the young readers, and then I'm going to base some of the pedagogical suggestions on the different or various points we're going to discuss in the next slides. Now, let me start with my personal experience. I've noticed, and I also did when I first started teaching, reading, we focus the whole reading lesson on the text, if it's a text or a short story, and then we ask, students, what did you understand? And then you say, that's good. Did you read it? Good. How do you feel about the story? Good, and so on. So the traditional way has not really, maybe some of us knew exactly what it took, to make sure the reading was really a personal experience for the learner or not. But I've noticed, and throughout, discussions with colleagues, throughout, some of the action research I conducted, years earlier on, I noticed that most of the practices, when it comes to teaching reading, is the pre-reading, during reading, or while reading, post-reading activities, and so on. Okay, so first I noticed that we as teachers, we need to listen and understand what is going on in the minds of those young readers. What works for them? What does not work at the same time while teaching reading? Okay, so to give you an example here, when you, why is it that sometimes you give a text to a short story in a page or 2 pages to a group of 20, 24 students, then some of them read it, they read it in 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes. Some read it and then stop right in the middle. They don't like it. Some of them like it, and so on. Okay, here we should take into account, this is very important, the age and the fascination aspect. Okay, this is the first parameter I'm going to talk about. Okay, the fascination aspect. To make this point clear, if you look at most activities of young people versus adults, most of what young people do is things where there is imagination, things where there is, taste, things where there is fun, when there is entertainment, and so on. This is very important. I'm gonna come back to these points while I discuss the 3 parameters I deem very important in teaching, in making reading a successful experience. Number 2, we as teachers, we need to be detectives, active agents that inspect, that inquire about the different aspects of motivation, as I said, cognition, meaning here the cognitive capacities of the learners, things they know, things they don't know, things they have, okay, logical connections in a text, all right, feelings, about the author, about the setting, about details in the story, for example, okay. This is, of course, very much related to their age and our own pedagogical practices. I think that teaching reading a little story or a text takes a lot more than the way most of the colleagues in the field, right, are doing. My third observation is that, the same way we want our reading students to be detectives while reading, okay, looking for connections, making meaning, okay, making logical deductions and so on, we also need to be detectives. And this means exactly the point number 2, okay, we need to look for what works, what does not work, what instigates or sparks this interest, and what does not. All right, fourth observation is that reading is a task. This is how I have come recently to see this task of teaching reading, and I give it a lot of time. Every time I have a reading text, Sometimes when I have those sessions of 1 hour 15 minutes, I devote it to reading, and we explode the text from different parameters, different perspectives, as I'm going to explain in moments. So a task where the young reader is socialized, cultured, because it's a foreign language for our students here, and a task where the teacher should cognitively guide the learners. When you say cognitively guide the learners, create new concepts in the foreign language that do not exist in the first language. Adapt, build knowledge of the world, make the text as a window onto the world. Where those, I am talking about young learners here, those young learners, I'm gonna discover things, I'm gonna discover the world, I'm gonna learn new vocabulary to use not only for exams or in writing essays, but also to experience or to express their own personal experiences whenever they need those words. This is what I wanted to start my presentation with. And I hope that it's clear. This is the vision I have now about reading. It's not only language. It's you are dealing with very young human beings, very young. Let me put it scientifically or technically. We are dealing with the billions of neurological connections taking place in the brain. I'm going to give you some examples, from science and so on. And the texts affect those neurological connections, and when you affect those neurological connections, you are affecting the person. I'm going to give examples when time comes. So these are, I guess, very important conclusions or points I have reached along my 20 years almost of teaching reading. After this, I would like to share with you some of the lessons I've learned, teaching reading. First, I've noticed, and I mentioned this in my introduction, that it's a process that builds and builds over time. I'm not only talking about the skills here. I'm not talking about the skills. I'm not talking about skills of understanding the main idea of the paragraph. That's linguistic, but there is nothing. Language is the software through which the different faculties of the brain interconnect and interplay. So it's not only language. It's more than language. It's a series of habits, interests, emotions, tastes, that interrelate. Here I remember a saying or part of a poem by Emily Dickinson, where she says, the brain is wider than the sky. The brain is wider than the sea. So brains of little kids are representations of the whole universe. What does this mean? This is scientific language. It means that there is no experience outside the human being that the mind cannot absorb and represent. The best way for human beings, the prominent, the central tool or means we have is language, and the best tool to use language is reading. It's text, it's written information, and this is why reading has been, in fact, or was, invented, to save, and accumulate the human knowledge. All right, so when a young person reads a story, there are series of emotions associated with that. That's an experience in itself. This is, in fact, the motive behind, modern teaching schools and institutions that require or ask kids and young learners to take novels home, to take short stories and read them at home. They understood that it's personal. It's personal. It's not only a text to learn, 10 or 15 new words. No, it's a personal experience. This is important, and this is what I call the fascination, or scientifically now they call it motivation. It's fascination. Okay, the young people are still, science says that during our first 10 years of existence, we are fascinated with the world. We're still discovering the world. Okay, you can imagine how much discovery, how much fascination what young people read would create. Okay, so this is point number one. Number two, I also discovered that reading is not only a process where young learners need to create meaning. Okay, what happened in this story, what happened in this text, what does this, this line mean, what does this sentence mean, and so on, but also where their experience of the world takes place. Okay, many scientists, now say that, we are born scientists. We are born scientists. Look at how young people play, in very poor countries like, Latin American or African countries, you would see kids in the streets who have nothing. They cannot afford to buy bicycles or, trailers or smartphones or iPads. It's creativity. They would take, scrap, they would take paper and then would design, a little car or little cart or whatever, then think about something, to create wheels and so on. This is science. That's innovation. That's in fact invention. You see, that's invention in modern terms, in modern business terms. That's invention. All right. So we are born scientists, and Robin Martin da Costa, this is one of the leading, scientists, is saying that every child is born a scientist. Okay, so let me give you an example. I was teaching, like 5 years ago, I was teaching a little story called, I guess the title was The Perfect Crime. The Perfect Crime. I guess that it's one of the, those English language teaching books. New Headway, I guess. Yeah, it was New Headway, pre-intermediate or intermediate. And then I had a more or less heterogeneous class where I had very good students and then very low level students and so on. So what happened is that we discussed the story. I was focusing on the first layer. I'm going to talk about layers and what I mean by zones or layers. I was talking about logic here. I'm trying to, how come there is a perfect crime? The story, if you know it, was about a wife who loved her husband, devotionally and so on. But then she discovered that he was, in a relationship with another woman. She could not make. She wanted to kill him and so on. And then she asked somebody, and he suggested to bring a frozen ice statue and then just put it on the table and so on. Turn the AC on. Okay, so it does not. And then you can use it to hit him, and then because it's so solid, it's gonna kill the guy, and then after that it's gonna melt, and then there is no no proof, no trait whatsoever of the crime. So one of the learners whose English was really low, he loved the story. That's number one. I'm talking about emotions here. I'm talking about interest here. I'm talking about motive. All right. We discussed the story, and then I said, okay, now everybody is gonna work alone. You're gonna summarize the story for me. That guy, because there is a correlation between information processing and language proficiency. He took longer. He was not listening to me. He took longer because he loved this. He took longer to understand the story and how it finished and how the police left, and then they could not suspect the woman and so on. So when his friends, his mates, started thinking about sentences, recycling all what we've learned and so on, he said, wow. He said, wow. Of course, everybody, crack up, laughing. But I like the word, I like the fact that he said, wow. You know why? He was so much involved in the story. Okay. It was, for me, it was an experience for him. He learned something new. He learned, of course, new vocabulary. This impacted his intelligence. You see, logic. He loved, I believe that he loved the logic in the story more than, vocabulary and everything. Okay, that's what I call by imprinting a person. All right, you can imagine that guy now, who was, I don't know, like he was 16 or something. Okay, maybe he's a mathematician now. I don't know. I'm not saying it's automatic, but what I'm talking about, I guess, is clear. The impact is lifelong. Okay, this is I guess important in our jobs and duties as teachers of reading. So my point from now, let me park this idea, is that we can create successful readers. We can not create, but at least help nurture reading as a habit, as a lifelong habit in the future generations, if we take these things into account, if we show them that it's reading is your personal, I am the teacher, I am here, but this is a story, this is an experience, okay, that is yours, it's personal, okay, you're gonna learn from it, not only language, I'm not only teaching language here, okay, it's a lot more than that, okay. This, as I said, frames the imagination and structures the mind. And for the colleagues who are in touch with the reviews of literature, and so on, mind framing takes most of its part in education through text. Okay, and I can share links and I can share studies on this. All right, more than speaking, meaning creation. Understanding, which is the goal, the ultimate goal of education, takes place when we listen, but reading is much more effective than this. This is also important. Okay, and then I've also learned that reading is a process that has lifelong mind framing, and structuring effects. Okay, here. I'm gonna mention the American linguist here. Okay, her name is here. All right, Marianne Walsworth. She's an American linguist, but recently she's been much more interested in the purely scientific study of language. And she worked with neurologists and so on. She's much more interested in neurolinguistics, and she published a study in which they found out that over 10 years of research, they scanned the brains of young readers, and they noticed that the neurological activity that takes place in the brain while reading for young people is as rich, as deep. When I say deep, here they're talking about the number of the neurons, and signals moving from, different parts of the brain and the different areas or, faculties in the brain that are activated. They use MRI, they use, all technologies to see those things. All right. This means the texts we discuss, the time we give during reading, okay, influences, okay, and shapes the logic, the vision of life, the vision of the world, okay, in ways that are a lot deeper than what we assume. So these two axes, these two parts are my, reflect my personal, when I say personal, as I said at the beginning, it's what I've noticed, and it's also what research has, backed up, those observations. Okay. Now, after this, I've noticed in the published literature that people are talking about the different parameters, language, cognition, metacognition, teaching strategies, or just text, or let strategies, develop over time and so on. I think that there are three main areas or zones, I call them zones here, okay, or tiers, okay, that are really important and that really make reading a deeper experience and a lot more than just the text or the story, okay, we're talking about. Okay, there is motivation, as I mentioned in the top of my workshop or presentation, okay, and I prefer the word fantasy when I talk about young people. Okay, there is age. What I mean by age here is cognition, is what they are capable or what they're not capable of doing. Okay, you know, in the early years. And then there is our roles, okay, as pedagogues, okay, teaching, learning process, or pedagogy. The best representation of this vision has been found in a well-known researcher. Her name is Jane Considine. You can check up her website, okay, and her articles. All right, Jane Considine has come up with the same vision that I'm talking about: fantasy, cognition, and pedagogy. These are the three parameters, the three variables that interact, and they are always there. But what she did is that she went deeper into her, you know, with her approach, and then determined these three zones or tiers for reading. These are the three zones for reading. She has zones for writing and for the other language skills. Now, if you look at the fantastic, this is tier 1. Fantastic, okay, tier. I talked about, you know, fantasy, imagination, taste, exploitation, exploration of the world, okay, exploration of the other cultures. When you give a text in a second language, in English, for example, to our learners in the UAE, okay, much, you know, most of the time they are exposed to other cultures. They are exposed to other geographical areas. They are exposed to, you know, histories, you know, from, you know, stories, you know, history from different, you know, parts of, you know, human existence and so on. So if you look at these three layers, okay, there is the fantastic layer, there is the stylistic layer here, number 2, and there is the analytics layer. These three correspond to what I call fantasy. Stylistic here, I would call it, okay, the pedagogy, and analytic here, okay, I would correspond this, okay, with age or cognition, logic, okay, much more difficult, okay, cognitive tasks. If you look at each tier here, we have 9 subcomponents. If you look, let's look at tier number 1, the fantastic here. We have feelings here. Look at feelings. Asking, noticing, touching, action, smelling, tasting, imagining, checking. I guess that you have already noticed that it's more or less, you know, senses, okay? That's why we have the word fantastic. It's the senses. And this confirms or backs up, okay, my first observations and so on, with why some students love stories, why some like reading, why some of them don't like reading. We want reading to become a habit. We should, right from you know, right at this point, we should work on these okay, skills or titles. She calls them, Jane Considine calls them you know, lenses. Okay, you can take a text, for example, a story. You can give kids stories to take home and so on, and just ask them to work on, let's say, emotion, feelings here. All right. After they read, you can discuss the different feelings in the text. Who used good language? Who used bad language? Can you give me words that, you know, reflect love? Words that reflect, you know, hate, and then you can also, you know, relate these feelings to, you know, the different, you know, actions in the story, okay, different, you know, fictitious, okay, scenes used in the story and so on. And then we have the second, you can work on layer 2 for another text. This is stylistic. The stylistic layer, this is what we do most of the time when we teach reading, okay? We focus on the setting, okay, of the text, all right? We try to make, you know, logical meaning, okay, making through, you know, true or false questions, all right? Why, where, you know, detecting information and so on. All right, themes, what is the topic, give a title, what is the main idea, solving the problems, you know, the why questions we always use and so on. Tier number 3, okay, I guess that I have something like, you know, 10 minutes, okay, is the analytics, okay, this is a little bit, number 3, okay, this is a little bit more difficult for teachers than for learners, okay. Let's take author assessment, the first, you know, component, or the first, you know, lens. There is language here, okay, there is personal opinions here, okay, there is, you know, stating predictions, okay, and so on. All right, it's difficult. Why? Because I think that this is due to, you know, 2 main facts. Number 1, most teachers are, you know, they content themselves with making sure all the vocabulary in the text is learned. It's used in the, you know, vocab, grammar activities and so on, and that's it. Number 2, fact number 2, we think that it's gonna be a little bit far-fetched if we ask our learners to predict, okay, what might happen in the story, okay, predict what might happen if this person did not do this or that and so on, okay. Language, okay, why did he use this style, why did he use this language, why did he use this word, not that word, and so on, okay. We tend to have this idea that I am in charge of the text I have here, okay. In fact, if you don't do this, if you don't use all these lenses, you are not going to use, you're not going to work on the personality, you're not going to make reading a personal experience. This is the ultimate goal of my speech today. Make it personal, make it, if we nurture this habit, if we raise this awareness that any text I give my learners, okay, is going to be something, they're going to take something personal out of it. If we don't do this, reading is still going to be seen just as a job, a task that should be done at school, most of the time for grades and so on. Okay, this is not what the UAE, okay, society wants. Okay, we want to have young people who love reading, who think that reading, taking a book, using an iPad, use an electronic version, use a paper version, it does not really make a big difference, okay? What is crucial here, what is of central and primordial importance is that they consider reading, you know, something that's going to add something to them, okay, to their vision on the world, of the world, that's and their abilities to communicate and see life in a richer, deeper manner. Okay, so now I got questions from colleagues. You know, what is the connection between the 3 layers? Okay, 3 zones. All right, the connection is always there. You can start discussing, let's say, the feelings in the story, and then you're gonna find yourself, okay, talking about, okay, style, talking about language. You are analyzing words, okay. It depends, of course, on the proficiency of the learners and so on, okay. Talking about words and so on, you will see that you are in fact making difference, okay, between senses, you know, taste and so on, okay. So, you know, bitter, sweet, sour, and so on. So now so my point is that as I said at the beginning, when I have a reading classes, for me, most of the time, they take the whole session. All right. Now, just to be brief, I'm a little bit under, you know, the constraint of time. Okay, and I guess that the idea here is clear. Okay, when you take a text, you can also, another question I get from friends is that, and colleagues, is that how can you make use of the 3 zones? Okay, while preparing for, what they mean is the pre-reading activities while reading and post-reading activities. It's the same answer. The 3 layers are always there. They are always there. What is important is that you make sure you exploit the reading material you work on at home, or material we give kids to take home, okay, in class or take home, okay, it doesn't really matter. I think that we should make reading a more human, okay, activity. rather than just, you know, linguistic, okay, or a language task. Okay, I guess that the idea here is more or less, okay, clearer. Let me move to the practices that more or less would correspond to the different colors, you know, the rainbow we've seen. Okay, let me go back to zone number one, motivation, what Jane Considine calls, you know, fantastic layer. Okay, this is very important to me. The reading curriculum should be designed by children. What does this mean? Of course, we choose stories, we choose text. Sometimes we have text. If the kids really like something, go with it. Go for it. Go for it. Okay. Sometimes I change text. I drop text altogether from books and I bring a similar story, similar text with more pictures, you know, with more color and so on. Just it's the same theme. Just because there is this taste, there is this connection, there is this emotional, okay, connection with the text, with the material that I know is gonna open, okay, or pave the way to work on logic, on, you know, vocabulary, on taste, on agreement, disagreement, as we have seen in the different colors. Number two, our curriculum here, or our job here as teachers, is the teaching and learning curriculum. Okay, so I'm not talking about pure pedagogically here, pure mechanical pedagogy. Okay, I have this step and then I'm gonna move on to this so that I can cover all these, you know, exercises and so on by the end of the session. No, take your time. If one task, you know, needs more time than the others, no problem with that, as long as there is that interest, that motivation, that, you know, use of the text, okay, as a way to discuss different topics, you know, topics that could range from, you know, emotions to history to animals to, you know, different languages, different parts of the world, science, fiction, and so on. Number three, what reading means to each of us. Okay, how we go about it. This is what I've just, okay, mentioned. It's, you know, in our art of teaching, you know, it's science and art. Okay, I guess that once a teacher takes these components into you know, in mind, into consideration, okay, you're gonna come out with your own way. Okay, so it's also the artistic aspect there, which should be part of the pedagogy. Okay, now always ask for choice of extracurricular reading. Students need to take something home. When they take a book, a little story, short story, you know, at hand, you know, home, you are already saying this is yours. It's personal. Okay, we need to give reading materials that take young learners to different worlds, as I said, different worlds, different, you know, discoveries, pictures, fiction, you know, and the power of the image, touch, argument, feeling, smell, and so on. So all these subcomponents in the three layers or tiers, okay, should be exploited. Going back to parameter number two, which is cognition, what we could read is enormous, more enormous than what we could imagine. And I explained this before. Not only do we have to encourage students to access to have access to rich, authentic text, but also enable the connections. Yeah, sorry, I got a call from the moderators. Yes, hello, doctor. Okay, and I guess that I have come to the end of my to the time allowed for the workshop. More or less, all the practices I'm gonna suggest, okay, in the next, you know, I suggest in the next 2 slides, okay, are related to those 3 zones. And I thank everybody for your patience and your attention, and I'm ready for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Feel free to see the question panel. We have some question here. Okay. In the question panel that speak about it is for all subjects, but it's going to be in English language. This is okay, and there is answer. About young readers and how to motivate them. What's your what's your advice to the young readers to grow the the reading in the English?
Yeah. Shall I answer this question orally?
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, sure. Advice to the I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel. It's advice. I think that is the proper or most proper advice is already there. I'm gonna just make it a little bit more scientific. Okay. My advice to the young readers is that when you buy a short story, a novel, or when you just take a newspaper to go through the news, all right, it's not only the language, it's not only the content. The content of what you read is only 1/3 of your experience. Be sure that each time you read, you are developing your logic. Studies have shown recently that there is a positive correlation between logic, mathematics, and reading. This is why most, American universities sometimes ask their, students who want to enroll to take, standard tests, okay, on reading and mathematics, okay, and at the end of high school as well, okay. If you are not good, reading and so on, you fail. All right, so read and read and read in simple plain English. It's read and read and read. You are working on yourself, you are working on the adult in you. There is a famous saying, the child is the father of the man. What you do, what you build at the very the first, let's say, the first 6, 7, 8 years of your life are going to determine the man or the woman, or most of the men or the women you are, or you're going to be in the future. So reading is can do to yourself, to your person, what parents, teachers, and the media can never do. That's I guess that's my piece of advice to the young learners. Just read and read and read.
Yeah, and there is another also like note, like can you repeat the neurological effects of reading?
Yes, that's something really interesting. Neurological connections is that, when a person is born, there are barely no connections in the brain. What I mean by connections, we have the nerves. Based on my most, recent readings, scientists now, they believe that what we know, what the information, let's use the IT language, data in our brain is represented in neurons, concepts in neurons. When a person is born, there are no concepts, and then there are no connections between concepts. So when a person first opens their eyes, what they know first is the face of their mom. And then with time, they hear, vision is developed before hearing. What happens is that after they see the face, the concept, the face of the mom is created. When they hear her voice, okay, they start to know that this sound, this voice is related to this face. This is a connection. When you read, you connect all the concepts that you've already, created in your mind, okay? Up to the age of, let's say 2 or 3, when you start first, working on the phonemes and then words, and then associate, pictures with their names, sounds, and so on. This is what neurological connection means. So the more you read, the deeper, the richer. You connect one concept from here with another concept from here, and so on. As you read about other cultures, you create, you create new entries in the mental lexicon. Okay, it's the CD, it's the hard disk that we have, okay, related to concepts and all what we know about the world. So reading has been, proven scientifically to create these neurological connections, which makes a person smarter, which makes a person, sharper, which makes a person, more logical, more understanding, more tolerant, more open to the others, more accepting, and so on. So I hope that this has shown the centrality, okay, of reading as a process for the individual, especially for the young people.
Yes. Also, if I can only do one which do you suggest for 6 to 8 years olds for the Jane Consider reading Rainbow or Lucky Caking reading workshop?
For could you, sir, could you repeat the question?
I mean, the question is regarding for the years from 6 to 8. How?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what is the question? From 6 to 8, how?
Yeah. Which do you suggest for the advising exactly?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. From 6 to 8, this is an age where there is a transition to. It's not a complete transition from this world of fantasy, you know, as I said in my presentation, looking for entertainment as a means to learn. It's the age where there is this transition to learning for entertainment. It's here that, you know, logic starts to build. All right, this is why you know, experts and pedagogues advise that at this age, it's good to discuss. If you're asking about the teachers here, it's good to go deeper into the stories, the settings, the characters, all the subcomponents I mentioned with this you know, category of learners. Okay, and this is why they also say that learners younger than this, just read to them. Just let them listen to you. Just, you know, try to make this habit, okay, familiar. Try to nurture it, okay, as something personal. All right. But for 6 and 8, okay, there is no harm in discussing the new words. Okay, there is no harm at this age in giving them, as I said, you know, concepts, words like, I don't know, frivolous. Okay, words like thesaurus. What is a thesaurus? What is you know, a humpback whale, for example. All right, there is no problem in doing this. Okay, from the age 6 to 8, even if those concepts are not really demarcated, really or properly created, you create those entries at that age. Okay, so at that age, it's still there is this entertainment. Okay, you know, they would still love, you know, stories with pictures, with color, with sound, with audio, you know, and so on. But there is no harm in starting to ask, you know, this category, special category of learners, okay, to take home, you know, adapted novels, short stories, okay, in paper form or even, you know, electronic form. There is no harm in that, and I guess that this is the best advice for this category, okay, to strike a balance between reading for fun and reading to learn and discover.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Khalid.
Most welcome.
And today we are enjoyable with you, and thank you again.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.